What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Sportstopia's Fantasy Fire and Ice Fantasy Football Mock Draft here on the Bettor Sports Network. My name is Justin Fensterman, Master of Ceremonies, as we go through this 12-team mock draft. I'm going to introduce the participants. A bunch of them will be joining us as all of you out there get ready for your own fantasy football drafts. We're going to bring up the draft board and let you know the scoring, the settings. Everyone's going to be on the same page, and that way all of you out there can take notes. And by the way, in the comments section, let us know what teams that you like, even the teams that you don't as well. We all have thick skin, and we can all, of course, make sure that we handle our own players that we love, and also go over some of those players that we really don't like, but we took anyway because the value just presented itself. Let's talk about the league first, though. 12-team, full PPR, quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers starting, 1 tight end, 2 flexes, so put a little emphasis on the wide receivers with 3 starting and the 2 flexes, kicker, defense, and 7 bench spots. We got ourselves an 18-round mock draft. For the scoring part of it, quarterback touchdowns, 5 points for passing, and for rushing 6, and then for running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, 6 points for a touchdown there. So that's really the only difference when it comes to the scoring, the 5 points per passing and the 6 for rushing when it comes to scores for the quarterback position. Our participants here, let's talk about who's drafting, give you the draft order right now. Let's start with Steezy Smith. He is out of the one hole from Sportstopia. Picking number 2, Kate Magdziuk from Sportstopia. Number 3, Cody Carpentier from Sportstopia. Number 4, Simon Groeneveld from Sportstopia. Then we have number 5, Britt Flinn from Fantasy Alarm and the Bettor Sports Network. Then at number 6, Monotone Durst from Sportstopia. At number 7, Matt Galka from Sportstopia. Then at number 8, Jeff Ratcliffe from FTN. Number 9, Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros. And then number 10, Terrell Furman from Sportstopia. Number 11, the football diehard Bob Harris from, of course, Football Diehards. And then picking on the wheel at number 12, John Daigle from 4 for 4. And we're already knee-deep into this draft. First round already completed. Going to bring on some of the participants. And as we get ready to bring up the draft board, we thank producer Keith for all he's done, Ed Williams as well from Sportstopia. But from what we saw, again, full PPR here, 3 wide receivers starting. No surprise there from Steezy Smith starting things off with Justin Jefferson. Jamar Chase then going after to Kate, it's second overall. Then our first running back, Christian McCaffrey, 3rd overall. Tyreek Hill back to the receivers, and we're going to have to talk with Simon Groeneveld about this. Tyreek Hill, 4th overall in this mock. Not seeing that too much. Then Britt takes Travis Kelce at number 5, followed by Cooper Kupp at number 6 for Monotone. Then Stephon Diggs goes to Matt Galka at number 7. Number 8, Austin Eckler, back to the running backs there. Bijan Robinson goes right after to Derek Brown. That was Jeff Ratcliffe who took Austin Eckler. Then Terrell Furman takes Garrett Wilson, another wide receiver, off the board there. So at this point in this mock, we're already up to 6 wide receivers being taken, 3 starting, 2 flexes as well. Got a lot of positions to fill. Then the football diehard Bob Harris takes Nick Chubb at number 11. And then rounding out the first round, CD Lamb for John Daigle. Going to bring in some of the participants right now. Britt Flinn from Fantasy Alarm and Bettor Sports Network, and Cody Carpentier from Sportstopia. Britt, what's going on? How you doing?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me. I have to have beef with Simon, though. I had Tyreek Hill in my queue, was not expecting him to go at 4, and he got sniped. And I'm very upset with Simon about that.
So with that, Britt, at this point, you would say that if you had, let's say Kelce was off the board, you would have taken Tyreek Hill 5th overall.
I would have, yeah. I think, especially now with the Jeff Wilson news that he's going to be out for 4 games, they're going to have to throw that ball a lot more. I think the second year in the system, we saw what Tyreek Hill did last year with 5 games without Tua, and he didn't even know the playbook. Now another year in that system with a healthy Tua. I love him this season.
That is an excellent pick right there from Simon. Then we'll have to see what Tyreek Hill can do. Again, this is a mock draft, but this is still preparation for all of us, getting more reps for our drafts and for all of you out there watching us right now here on Bettor Sports Network here. Let's also bring in Jeff Ratcliffe from FTN as well. But Cody, what's going on? It's good talking to you here. And at number 3, you took Christian McCaffrey. For you, 2 wide receivers off the board. Was it a no-brainer for you at that point?
Yeah, those were the 3 I was looking at, obviously. Why wouldn't you? I know this starts 3 wide receivers. We got 2 flex, but it's hard to pass on the best running back that we've seen in fantasy football in the last couple of decades. So I took Christian McCaffrey here, and I kind of trust myself with wide receivers later on. So that's kind of why I didn't reach on a Hill or Diggs or Cup or Wilson or whichever way you want to go about it. But yeah, I'm happy about the McCaffrey start. And then I just grabbed BTN in the second. So kind of zigging, I guess, is what you'd say, zigging when everyone else is going after wide receiver.
Well, I mean, look, you'll be able to get some value in a little bit, but you already locking up 2 running backs, the only participant to do so through the first 2 rounds. Jeff Ratcliffe from FTN, what's going on, Rat Pack? How you doing?
I'm okay. I do want to cut to LaDainian Tomlinson to say, hey, what the heck? Best running back in football and fantasy football in the last 2 decades. Maybe Adrian Peterson might be a little ticked off about that as well there, Cody.
I mean, LaDainian was what, 2000? When did he retire? 2008? We're pushing 2020, 2024, right? 2023, I guess. 15 years maybe?
I'll give you that.
Okay, I'll take that.
Best pass catching running back maybe we've ever seen. So
there you go. Yes,
and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic there whatsoever.
Jeff, you ended up taking Austin Eckler, and you took him over Bijan Robinson, and we're seeing Bijan Robinson go all over the first round depending on the draft there. Was it a tough decision for you taking Eckler over Bijan, or were you flipping a coin, or were you just so dead set on taking Eckler with that pick when it presented himself to you?
Well, no, it wasn't over Bijan Robinson. I have Austin Eckler at number 4 on my board. In fact, I have number 7, Nick Chubb. So if anything, maybe it was between him. But no, I just don't overthink it, man. Take the highest guy on your board in the first round. Let that dictate your strategy from there.
What are your expectations, Jeff, as well as you came back in the second round to take your first wide receiver? You took Chris Olave. And by the way, this is after the second round starting John Daigle takes Tony Pollard, then followed by A.J. Brown. So Bob Harris and John Daigle each have a running back and a wide receiver, Harris having Chubb and then A.J. Brown. And then Terrell Furman from Sportstopia started with 2 wide receivers, Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. Then Amon-Ra St. Brown goes after that, a little wide receiver run we're at. Jeff, it reaches you. What are your expectations for Chris Olave this year?
Well, we know what he is good at. He is good at getting downfield. We saw that last season, not necessarily as much at the college level, which I thought was an interesting dynamic to his game. I mean, he certainly was more downfield in 2021 than what we saw to like Jackson Smith and Jigba, for example, but really excelled there. And Derek Carr is coming off a season where he averaged 9.4 air yards per throw. Devontae Adams really capitalizing on that. So I think this is going to be pretty nice. And let's be clear, with those guns that Derek Carr is sporting right now as well, he should be able to push that ball vertically to Chris Olave.
Jeff, you got about 20 seconds. I was going to say there, I'm sorry that I asked you a question while you're on the clock. It is a 1 minute.
It's all right, man. I broadcasted while doing drafts, my man. I got you. I got you.
That's a workout, man, mentally and physically right there. But you took DK Metcalf. I have a ton of shares of DK Metcalf. Where you got him is great. So you start off taking after Austin Eckler, Chris Olave, and DK Metcalf. Excellent receiving core that you started out with. Going back to you, Britt, I mean, you started with Travis Kelce there, the only tight end off the board right now. Then DeVonta Smith and Jahmyr Gibbs here. So I got to ask you, with Jahmyr Gibbs, what are you expecting from Gibbs? Because there are a lot of people out there wondering, well, what's Montgomery's role going to be ultimately? Is he going to limit Gibbs's ceiling? How do you feel about Gibbs?
Yeah, I absolutely love Jahmyr Gibbs. I love, for one, the reaction out of the Lions draft room after they drafted him. Tells you almost everything that you need to know about how much he's going to be used. Then you've got Brad Holmes saying that he doesn't really care that he's labeled as, quote, a running back, that he's a positionless weapon. To me, that makes me very just excited and ecstatic about his usage. Then you look at historically, 11 of the 12 running backs who have been drafted in that tier in the actual NFL draft have had 200 touches at least in their rookie season. I'm not afraid of Gibbs not getting touches because of David Montgomery.
So Gibbs, Devontae Smith, and Travis Kelce, one of each of the positions so far, tight end, a wide receiver, and a running back for Britt Flinn through 3 rounds. Cody, you started out like we talked about with Christian McCaffrey, Travis Etienne. Then you took Calvin Ridley over some of the other receivers that were still on the board, like DK Metcalf, who Ratcliffe ended up taking a few picks later, and also over T. Higgins as well. And we haven't seen Calvin Ridley in a long time playing football there. Now going to Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. We saw tremendous growth from last year, but the Jaguars have a lot of pass catching options on the team now. How excited are you about finally getting to see this fit with Ridley in Jacksonville?
I've never been a massive fan of Calvin Ridley. I respect his route running wholeheartedly, but I think this team's going to be really good. I trust Trevor Lawrence taking another big step, and this division is not very good, but I think it's just good enough to keep these games interesting. Jacksonville should blow this division out. I think Calvin Ridley is the best wide receiver on this team. You mentioned there's a lot of people there. There's Evan Ingram's there, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, but I'm not really worried about the Zay Joneses of the world and the Christian Kirks. I think this is going to be Calvin Ridley as the Uno, as the Alpha, and he's going to get a massive target share. Evan Ingram, can he repeat what he did last year? Sure, but he also didn't have the presence of a Calvin Ridley in there. I also have Travis Etienne, so it's kind of like what John Daigle did at the 112-2-1 with Lamb and Pollard. I'm going kind of with the not really cheaper version, but around later version of Etienne and Ridley. So I'm just going to bet on the Jacksonville offense and start probably hitting wide receivers here.
Well, we'll have to see. Will Cody go after Trevor Lawrence in this mock? We'll have to see in a little bit. Let's recap what's gone on further in the second round, because after Ratcliffe, where we left off talking round by round coverage here, he took Chris Olave. Jalen Waddle then goes Matt Galka. Saquon Barkley off the board in the second round to Stu, and he, after taking Cooper Kupp, he takes Saquon Barkley there, Devontae Smith to Britt. And then we have Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, and Josh Jacobs going to Kate Magdziuk after she took Jamar Chase with the second overall pick. Rounding out the second round, our first quarterback goes off the board, and that is one Jalen Hurts to Steezy, who took Justin Jefferson to start things off. And then he follows it up by taking his first running back in Joe Mixon in the third round. And that is where we stand as we enter the third round. We're right now in the fourth round in pick by pick, 1 minute clock. Like I said, 3 wide receivers starting, 2 flexes as well, full PPR for quarterbacks, 5 points for a passing touchdown, for rushing for quarterbacks, 6, and then for running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, 6 points for touchdown as well. Joe Mixon starting off the third round to Steezy, followed up by Najee Harris there. Calvin Ridley, as we talked with Cody about that. T. Higgins goes after that. Jahmyr Gibbs, we talked with Britt. Then Patrick Mahomes goes. And Britt, I got to ask you, were you at all considering taking Patrick Mahomes, being that you have Travis Kelce? And some try to do that by, if they take someone, let's say a high-end wide receiver, maybe trying to grab their quarterback at some point in the draft. Other people, it just depends on who falls to them at certain points. Were you considering going Patrick Mahomes with your third round pick of Gibbs, being that you have Travis Kelce?
I mean, I considered it a little bit, but there's so much value in these middle rounds at quarterback. I'm not really concerned about getting a stack with Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I think that I can find that elsewhere. And running back kind of falls off quite a bit after this tier. So I really wanted to get that spot locked up. And that's why I went with Gibbs. But man, Mahomes being right there was too tasty.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I was wondering if that you were going to go that direction, but Patrick Mahomes goes right after you to Stu, Monotone, Durst. Then Matt Galka takes Ramondre Stevenson after that. And then we talked with Jeff about his DK Metcalf pick. Aaron Jones going right after that. So when it comes to Derek Brown, so far for him, 2 running backs in Bijan Robinson and Aaron Jones, and 2 wide receivers at Amon-Ra St. Brown and Deontay Johnson, who he took in the 4th round. But Deebo Samuel goes to Terrell. 3 straight wide receivers to start for Terrell. That was the only player to do that here in this mock draft. He takes Deebo Samuel. Amari Cooper goes to the football diehard Bob Harris, who took Nick Chubb and A.J. Brown before that. And then John Daigle on the wheel after taking C.D. Lamb, Tony Pollard, a couple of Cowboys, takes a Charger in Keenan Allen, and then goes with Josh Allen right after that. So with that, Britt, Flynn, thank you so much again for joining us, and good luck with the rest of your draft. And it's only a mock, but you'll still crush it anyway.
Thank you, Fensty. Really appreciate you having me on.
No, absolutely. Absolutely there. And with that, let's talk about the fourth round quickly. And John took Josh Allen to start that fourth round. DJ Moore then goes to the football diehard Bob Harris, who's now taken 3 straight wide receivers. Ken Walker then goes to Terrell Furman, and we're actually going to bring Terrell Furman in right now to talk about the beginnings of his draft. What's going on, Terrell? How you doing, man?
What's going on, fellas? How's everything doing? Yeah, it was a fun start to the draft. I talked about it yesterday when we were talking about the best ball draft. If I'm on that turn, there's Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams are the 2 that I'm immediately looking at, and I don't care if I'm reaching for Wilson at all, but just seeing what preseason Rodgers circle of trust, Garrett Wilson should be looking at a few days of at least 10 plus targets, if not every single game.
Were you at all considering going with someone of another position, or did you feel at that point when you took Deebo Samuel, it was a best available?
Yeah, it was the 3 wide receiver, 2 flex angle. I wanted to be really stacked on wide receiver. I felt like I could, piece together running back with a couple of pass catchers. Oh, crap. Darren Waller just went. Oh, nice, Cody. And so, I had him in the queue. That threw me off. But I wanted to be really stacked up on these stud wide receivers because I felt better about later round running backs.
Well, Ken Walker goes to you as your first running back after taking 3 straight wide receivers. Deontay Johnson then goes to Derek Brown, who's actually going to be joining us as well. We can bring Derek Brown in just a second. But before we let you go, Jeff Ratcliffe, you took Mark Andrews there here. We're going to be seeing what should be a high up-tempo at least more pass-heavy offense in Baltimore. How do you feel? What are your expectations for Andrews this season?
Well, I think it's still going to be very run heavy, actually.
Okay.
If you look at what Georgia did last year, I think it's still going to be leaning on that committee approach in the backfield. You got a quarterback who can ink in at 150-ish rushing attempts during the course of the season. But the most important thing is the best tight end in the nation, Brock Bowers. Well, guess who is Brock Bowers now? It's Mark Andrews in that offense. And by the way, to everybody out there who says this about Kyle Pitts, I'm going to start with you're wrong, which is a great way to win over an audience, but you're wrong. Kyle Pitts, tight end in name only. No, he's not. Mark Andrews is tight end in name only. He stayed into block on one snap last year, and basically is a big slot receiver. So to get him in the 4th round, happy to do it. Had a 3rd round grade on him. I'll take the round of value.
Jeff, let everybody know where they can find all of your content and all of your work, please, before we let you go.
Somewhere on the internet. I don't know. It's worth a Google. If you find out that I played professional lacrosse, that's actually not me. That's another guy named Jeff Ratcliffe. But like radio, TV, stuff like that, FTN, you can find me.
Jeff, thank you so much for stopping by for a few minutes. It's always great talking with you. Let's now bring in, and to join the party, let's bring in Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros. And while we bring Derek in, just going to go over what else happened in the 4th round. Galka, after Jeff Ratcliffe took Mark Andrews, took Dameon Pierce. Then we had Drake London go to Stu. And then after that, Britt Flynn took Tyler Lockett as her 2nd wide receiver. Simon Groeneveld takes TJ Hawkinson, the 3rd tight end, off the board, followed by Lamar Jackson, who Ratcliffe was just talking about as well, part of that Baltimore offense. Chris Godwin then goes to Kate Magdziuk, and then Christian Watson to Steezy to round out that 4th round. And then he starts off with another wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. Then after that, Alexander Madison goes to Kate, her 3rd running back of this draft, besides Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris, adding Alexander Madison to her core. Darren Waller, who Terrell was just commenting on because he wanted Darren Waller. But Cody, Darren Waller, we know the situation with him. We know over the last couple of years, health hasn't been on his side. But now he goes to a team with Daniel Jones, who we saw make massive improvements, take steps last year. But also the Giants receiving core is so light in depth. This tight end here, where we're seeing Darren Waller go, we're starting to see him move up boards. It's almost like he's a must-have where he's going right now.
Yeah, I think Darren Waller, my kind of attitude towards the tight end position this year is if you don't get Darren Waller, just ship it to Carolina, take Hayden Hurst way late because he's basically going undrafted at this point. And I think Waller kind of sits at the top right there. I completely agree with everything Jeff said about Mark Andrews. Everybody knows about Kelsey, but I think the 3rd guy in that conversation is Darren Waller this year, as much as I still love TJ Hawkinson. I think Darren Waller, looking at literally a 25 plus target share is not out of the realm of possibilities. And I think that's something you're going to see. He's going to return to the 2019 to 2020 Darren Waller that we saw have 1,100 plus receiving yards. He's going to be up. He's going to be out. He's the best. It's not even close as him being the best target in this New York Giants offense. Saquon Barkley, of course, is there, but I think that having both of these guys on the field at the same time brings a different dynamic to the offense, as well as having the speedsters like Jalen Hyatt on the outside. And if Sterling Shepard can stay healthy, I think it's only going to open up more in the passing game for everybody in this offense, including Darren Waller, who I believe finishes as tight end numero uno in fantasy football in 2023.
Cody Carpentier, part of the Sportstopia team. Cody picking number 3 overall there. He's got the 3rd pick there, and that is where he stands right now, just taking Darren Waller in the 5th round. Cody, thank you so much for stopping by, man. By the way, Cody, where can we find all your work as well?
Yeah, so I just joined the Sportstopia team this last week, and everything else you can find over at rosterwatch.com, rosterwatch on YouTube, and then we're on Sirius as well on radio and things like that. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Cody Carpentier. Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros. D-Bro, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Doing good, Fancy. How's it going, boys? This draft is unfolding beautifully. I could say anything off the top here, as I think it's my pick right now. I'm loving some Yahoo ADP right now.
So with that, I mean, so you're on the clock right now, and just to go over Derek's team, Derek taking Bijan Robinson, then follows that up with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Aaron Jones, then back to the running backs he goes, then Deontay Johnson. So he's been going with a running back wide receiver pattern, back to the running backs with J.K. Dobbins, and then loading up even more on running backs, James Cook. And Derek, we've seen James Cook. It's funny. I feel like, because I watch a lot of average draft position data boards and everything, and it seems like you were getting him almost in the 80s, the 70s and 80s for a little bit. But now all of a sudden it's almost like people are realizing, oh yeah, this guy is the guy in Buffalo. Is that what you're seeing as well as you drafted him?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been high on James Cook all offseason. I've been touting his praises, and now it seems like general consensus has woken up. I've said it from the very beginning of the offseason. He's discount Jahmyr Gibbs. We're buying into the same type of archetype. He's going to make his hay on explosive plays and in the passing game. We have concerns about Gibbs and Cook in the red zone. How much do they get work there? But we can also not shy away. If everybody wants to sit here and draft Jahmyr Gibbs, why don't you just draft James Cook later in drafts? Same bet, baby. So, yeah, I've got him as a top 24 running back, and I could see, I've said it, like the upside for him is as an RB1. And while everybody can get all crazy about Damian Harris getting a goal line carry in the preseason, can we not dismiss the fact that James Cook was the dude on the rest of that freaking drive and for the rest of preseason? Like, don't get lost in the sauce, people.
You can indeed there. And you're definitely not getting, you're getting a little lost in the running back sauce, but you're loading up, Derek, at that point. And I got to ask this, was this your James Cook, besides everything you just said, was part of the motivation to load up even more on running backs? Did that have to do with J.K. Dobbins' health and you were hedging a little bit?
No, I mean, to me, this is just taking advantage of ADP. Looking at Yahoo ADP, there are a lot of wide receivers that I feel like through the next 2 to 3 rounds. And I know that in this format, we're starting 3 wideouts. I'm usually a wide receiver heavy and early approach drafter. But again, we try to stay liquid in all these different drafts and all these different draft rooms. So being sensitive to the format, to the site you're drafting on and looking at ADP, I mean, to me, I'm aggressively drafting because we see this year after year after year after year. Rookie wide receivers and second and third year guys crush. So why are we still shying away? So looking at Yahoo ADP, and I'm here talking the table, so I'm probably going to get sniped. But, I mean, looking at all these different guys that I'm looking down the board at rookie wideouts that are available in the next 2 to 3, 4 rounds, I mean, I feel really good about my guys at the top here with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Deontay Johnson. I think both of those guys are going to be a lock for 130, 140 targets. So really, I'm looking at, okay, if those guys stay healthy and we're drafting like we're right, which we should all be doing, then I'm piecing together wide receiver 3 on a weekly basis and just asking, okay, out of this gaggle of wide receivers I'm about to sit here and go with, because I've already stockpiled the running back room and I'm good for that on a few rounds, I can just sit here and piece together wide receiver 3. And if one of those guys goes to the moon, they're never leaving that spot. But my top two spots here, I feel great about.
No, and you're running the table when it comes to the running backs. That's for darn sure. If we were actually playing out this league, you'd essentially be the guy to go to for trades if one of your other league mates here lost a running back here. And speaking of league mates here that may lose a running back at part, look, we're not in the injury predicting business or anything. And Terrell, you took Breece Hall, and the reporting on Breece Hall has been very interesting over the last number of weeks here, because on one hand, you're hearing, oh, looks good. But then on the other hand, will he be ready? And how much will he be utilized early on in the season, especially now that the Jets also just got Dalvin Cook, who's dealing with a bum shoulder here as well. So the Jets have a little bit of a damaged backfield here. But what are your thoughts on Breece Hall and that the Jets may bring him along a little slowly to start the year?
I mean, that's always a possibility. And I think that I felt good with Breece Hall, just knowing the fact that I'm getting a dynamic player who has great burst and speed on the outside. He can absolutely kill it. And we can't predict injury. And we've seen this type of offense, this Aaron Rodgers-led offense, this Nathaniel Hackett-led offense, have two running backs that can thrive in the offense before, with the Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. So I think that this is another opportunity for it's just to be a two running back committee. I still think Breece Hall is still the guy. I think if I had to put a number on it, he's probably going to get the most of the touches out between the two. But I still think that, he's going to have a fairly enough to be sizable and a good workload back. He's not my first back or anything like that, but I like him here in my starting lineup.
Yeah, Terrell took him after taking Ken Walker the previous round in round 4. We now welcome in Stu Monotone Durst from Sportstopia. Stu, do you want me to call you Stu or do you want me to call you Monotone?
Stu works perfectly fine around here.
That's totally fine. So far with what you've done in your draft, you ended up getting Patrick Mahomes in the 3rd round, and this was after Cooper Kupp, Saquon Barkley. Then you got a few receivers, 3 of your next 4 picks being receivers and young guys in Drake London, Jackson Smith-Njigba. And you also got Terry McLaurin as well, who we've seen drop off a little bit. Obviously, he's dealing with a little bit of an injury as well. But got to ask you, with this Atlanta offense, what are your thoughts and expectations regarding Drake London? And now Desmond Ridder doesn't have too many reps under his belt here, but what are your thoughts regarding London for the year?
Yeah, I'm not as much of an Atlanta believer as maybe some people out there. I'm not sure this is going to be a great team, a great playoff offense or anything like that. But there's one thing we do know, and that's he had a 30% target share last year. This is an absolute target hog out there. He doesn't have much competition. Like you said, Kyle Pitts is still being used in very confusing fashion, right? He's one of those guys that is consistently still blocking. He's not out there even in the preseason, right, for a very high percentage of route runs so far. I have a lot of confidence that Drake London is going to carry over that dominant target share once again. And for my second wide receiver off the board, if I can get another wide receiver 1, I'll definitely take that.
And Stu, let me ask you as well about David Montgomery. I mean, and now it's when you're doing these shows, it's like you can't give your strategy away too much. But if other players are off the board, then we can talk about it now. So you ended up drafting David Montgomery here in the 6th round. What are your thoughts on the division of carries between him and Jahmyr Gibbs? We were just talking with Britt Flinn about Jahmyr Gibbs, and she has no fears regarding his production potential. How does Montgomery fit into Detroit's plans here?
Yeah, he's an absolute touchdown hog, right? At the end of the day, that's what I want right here. This is going to be a good offense, right? Last year, they were a top 5 offense. Might be a little bit of regression there, but I still see another top 10 offense right here. I want the guy that they're going to hand the ball off to on the goal line, right? This is not a team that has dominant goal line weapons at all, right? Obviously, the tight end, we're depending on Laporta, kind of new guy. Amon-Ra St. Brown, great separator, but not necessarily a red zone target hog or anything like that. I think there's going to be plenty of touchdowns to go around for this offense. Both of these guys are going to be very involved. That's obviously a given. I'm not getting a workhorse back here. But at the end of the day, you got to reach for the guys you like at times, right? I looked at the draft board. I had the same thought that Debro did. I want to save wide receivers a little bit later. I could not believe I just got JSN. So at the end of the day, I'm going to reach for a guy I know he's going to have week-to-week value. He's going to provide that consistent rushing floor, and he has tons of touchdown upside. So I love, even if I have to reach a little bit, I love being able to jump up and get my guy, David Montgomery.
Let's talk with you, Terrell, because I saw you make a little bit of a reaction here. You've been talking about how you got sniped already one time. Did you just get sniped again? Because the reaction I saw here on camera was that you got sniped.
Oh, absolutely. Derek took Justin Herbert. I thought that was incredible value in the 7th, and I had him queued up.
Crazy
I was
value,
like,
man.
no way. I was waiting as possible, but I saw Justin Herbert there, and I was like, oh, there's no way.
How does that happen? How does that happen?
You
When
just
you're with
shake
pros.
the hand of Yahoo ADP and you say thank you.
When you're with the pros, they're good on. We're all good on quarterback. Nobody's stressing about quarterback, and next thing you know, we're in the 7th round, and it's all these good quarterbacks left. And I was just like, oh man, I'm ready to get them. So I ended up accidentally auto drafting after that. So, well, not after that. I took Jamal Williams, but I did not mean to take AJ Dillon there. So I'm pretty stacked on running back right there. I think I'm going to leave that position alone for the foreseeable future and try to load up on my backup wide receivers.
Terrell, I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm a big-time A.J. Dillon guy. I'm thinking that he's surpassing 200 carries this year. So I think you'll be absolutely fine with A.J. Dillon. So auto-drafted or not, fate actually got you a decent running back there. Terrell, thank you so much for joining us.
Definitely.
You're all over
Appreciate
these
y'all.
here. And thank you again. And by the way, where else can we find your work besides, of course, Sportstopia?
You can find me in Sports Gambling Podcast Network at @reallyreal__ on Twitter. All of that stuff, WNBA season still going on, NBA, NFL, all that stuff. Let's do it.
Oh, Terrell hosting the streams here, especially did a couple with him for baseball earlier this week on Bettor Sports Network. Terrell, thanks for stopping by, man.
Definitely appreciate y'all.
Derek, I have a question for you here. We're actually getting a question in our chat here, and I want to ask you about it because you're Mr. Running Back at this point in this draft here. Jeb on our chat is asking, so he's saying he has Montgomery and Kamara on the bench. Should I try to trade Kamara for a 2 to 3, I guess Kamara for 2 to 3 bench guys and keep Montgomery as his starter, or stay put with both guys? So should he try to deal Kamara, or are you thinking he should just stand pat?
Stand pat, man. I've been saying it, and Kamara is one of the guys that he is grossly mispriced still. Like where he goes in drafts, basically we're all still like that ADP is suggesting we're still waiting to hear, is he getting 4 or 6 game suspension? With the news that he's only going to be out for 3 games, his ADP is not adjusted enough. I have him as a top 24 running back. And we could say all the things about Taysom Hill and the worries of the red zone and all that kind of stuff. We think that the Saints offense is going to be better. They have the most favorable schedule in the NFL. Kamara, even for all his bumps and bruises last year, was the RB13 in fantasy points per game and the RB7 in expected fantasy points. But you can draft this guy as an RB3 or a flex play? What are we doing here? No, do not trade away Kamara. Keep Montgomery. If both of these guys, especially Montgomery, is going to get all these goal line totes, and even if he's not as good as Jamal Williams in the sense that just running with the touchdown luck, can we still pencil him in for 8+ touchdowns, considering how good that offense is, even if he doesn't go double digits? At that point, could both of these guys, and I have it ranked this way, Fancy, could Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery both finish as top 24 running backs? I think it's possible this year. I'm not getting rid of either one of those guys.
All right, so you're Jeb. Thank you so much for your comment in the chat and for watching us here. And stand pat. That's what D-Bro Derek Brown says from Fantasy Pros. Derek, where can we find all your work before we let you get back to the draft here?
Yeah, man. All the things and stuff are at fantasypros.com. Right now, we have all of our draft kit is live. We're crushing stuff. We just had Fantasy Fest yesterday. All of those clips are up on YouTube, so you're not subscribed to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Again, while you're watching this, minimize the screen, listen to this draft, head over, subscribe there. You can check out all this stuff, man. I mean, we're in the throes of crunch time and draft season, so head us up at Fantasy Pros, man, to be rocking on the Draft Wizard to get ready for drafts just like this, baby.
Derek, thank you so much again for stopping by, and good luck with the rest of this mock here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
For sure, for sure. We're going to keep Stu here hanging out for a few minutes here, but let's bring in a couple more. Let's go to both goalposts, essentially, of this draft here. Let's go to Steezy Smith from Sportstopia and John Daigle from 4 to 4. Steezy picking number 1, John Daigle picking 12th in this draft here. And I'm going to start with you, John. John, what do you think of the 12th pick overall? Let's just say you're in a Kentucky Derby style situation and you get the option to choose any number pick that you want. Where does 12 fit in out of 12 picks here?
Oh, it's not ideal, of course. I would like better players, but it is fun because I'm higher on consensus on both Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tony Pollard. I say Amon-Ra St. Brown, even though I drafted CeeDee Lamb because that was an auto draft. I was trying to find Amon-Ra, so that was my mistake. At the turn, I would have gone those two players instead, but I did end up getting Tony Pollard, who I still believe should be a first, second round turn option when usually in these types of formats, 12-team leagues, 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, he actually usually goes mid-second, which is the most egregious fantasy ADP of any player out there. So I don't mind it. And you just kind of let the draft fall to you. I'm just drafting on tiers, basically. Josh Allen came back. That's something that usually doesn't happen in a 1-quarterback league. And so even though I usually don't target those top 3 quarterbacks, given all the other strong options around them in 1-quarterback leagues, I don't mind that past ADP. So overall, I think it's going okay so far.
So this is John's team drafting on the wheel at the 12th spot, CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard, then Keenan Allen. I absolutely love Keenan Allen. And when we were just talking about Justin Herbert there, I mean, excellent situation with Keenan Allen and Herbert. Now Herbert hopefully can stay healthy, fully healthy for more than a couple of weeks there. Then after that, you drafted Josh Allen, Jahan Dotson. And I gotta ask you, John, because again, I'm sitting here watching these ADP draft boards and these risers. And I'm feeling like in the last 2 to 3 weeks, Jahan Dotson has gone from maybe a 8th, 9th round pick to now all of a sudden people are drafting him in like the 6th round or even in the 5th round. You were on the wheel there, so 5th, 6th round. Why the steam on Jahan Dotson?
It is slightly concerning since most of his production came via touchdowns, which is the most unpredictable stat in all of fantasy football. 7 of them last year and only 35 catches. At the same time, though, when he was on the field, he still soaked up 40% of his team's end zone targets. So he got targets where it matters most. And now we have this looming Terry McLaurin turf toe injury where we just don't know if it's going to limit or hold him out for an extended period of time. So I got a little more confident in Jahan Dotson. I won't reach for him in like the 5th round, as you mentioned. But having him in that Michael Pittman, Mike Evans tier of players around Gabriel Davis as well, I think that's perfectly fine for everyone in 12-team leagues.
So, and final question for you, at least for now, you're still going to stick with us here. But you just drafted and by the way, after Dotson, you got Gabe Davis, Jerry Jeudy, a couple more receivers there. Judy's a little bit banged up right now. Then you drafted Jonathan Taylor to start the 8th round. Yeah. So, again, great value. We know that he's out 4 weeks here. Where do you think he ends up going? Because we know that Miami has been linked and the Colts have denied trade offers. They've turned them down. And then we saw a report in the last day or so that the Packers, of all teams, they have 2 running backs. The Packers were interested as well. So let me ask you this year. You just drafted Jonathan Taylor. Where in your mind do you think that he'll be playing football this year?
I don't know. That's the funniest part. I have no clue. But from a top-down perspective, playing the game of fantasy football, I think it's easy to look at the players being drafted around now, and we all have a price. We all have just a range of players we think Jonathan Taylor will beat us at. And I see Khalil Herbert, Kenneth Gainwell, all the other running backs that went around him, and I say, I'm not scared of those guys. Like, Khalil Herbert hasn't reached a 5% target share in his first 2 seasons of the league. I'm not scared of Herbert beating me. I don't know what universe I have to be in for him to be an RB1. Whereas Taylor, even if he plays 8 games, that's a player that still beats us in the 8th or 9th round. So I just kind of take that range and I say, okay, I'm not scared of Brian Robinson, even though I do like Brian Robinson. I'm about to draft him right here, actually. But I'm terrified of Jonathan Taylor. So that's when I think everyone should just look at their draft boards and say, this is it. This is where no one scares you except JT.
So you now, with drafting Brian Robinson here, you're going to now have multiple commanders, and someone else that has multiple commanders is Stu as well. Stu Durst with us from Sportstopia. And Stu, I got to ask you this here, because you got McLaurin, but also Antonio Gibson with Bieniemy there now. Are we going to see this guy get a good amount of targets here? Are they finally going to throw to this guy a little bit more? Because I've been on Antonio Gibson, and I've been waiting for years for him to get the respect and the targets. Is this the year it's going to happen?
No, it's not. No, it's not. Unfortunately not. I know I just drafted him, so maybe that's not the answer you want to hear, but I think it's been abundantly clear since the beginning of training camp, right? Antonio Gibson said it himself that he's going to be playing more of that J.D. McKissic role this season. So yeah, sure, he is going to be targeted quite frequently during the games. But when you kind of drafting for that floor, right, when we think about Antonio Gibson over these last couple of years, people said Antonio Gibson and Christian McCaffrey in the same sentence a lot more than once, right? People really wanted that kind of fusion back that's going to do both for you. Antonio Gibson's not going to do both for you, but he's still a respectable RB3. I need some depth, right? I only have David Montgomery so far, and obviously an RB1 in front of that. I wanted a little bit of depth. I wanted someone that's going to give me consistent points every single week, and I think Antonio Gibson can do that. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to, give us that Christian McCaffrey season we've always been wanting.
Stu, it's disappointing to me because I'm an Antonio Gibson mark at this point, but hey, we appreciate your analysis. And where's Stu Durst, by the way, from Sportstopia? Where can we find your work, and definitely on social media as well?
Yep, you can find me over on Twitter at Monotone Football. That's where all my work comes from. I'll be live in just an hour doing some season-long NFL player props, if that interests you. Mostly player prop sports betting over here. So pleasure to draft with all you guys. I'm going to make my final pick live right here. We're going to go with a nice backup quarterback. Geno Smith, baby, one of my favorites this year. Remember that name.
Hey, you're getting where he's going right now in drafts. Disrespectful considering what he did last year's. Amazing value. I've got 2 shares. Cody, Dowd, Stu, thank you so much again for joining us.
No problem. Thank you. Yes.
Steezy Smith from Sportstopia picking first overall in this draft here. Let's go over Steezy's team here. Steezy, first of all, welcome to the broadcast. How are you?
Man, I'm feeling great. Just waking up. So I'm a little tired, but man, I was really looking forward to this. So, thank you for having me on, Fancy.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you started with Justin Jefferson, and let's start there. I mean, that's really the most common first overall pick that we're seeing. For you, was it even a debate, or are you Jefferson all the way?
It's Jefferson all the way for me. I mean, the only other play I'd really consider is a Christian McCaffrey, but I think with the Justin Jefferson, some people are concerned because, Jordan Addison is going to take away targets. TJ Hawkins is going to take away targets. I think the opposite. I think if anything, those guys are only going to open up targets for a Justin Jefferson. So instead of double or triple teaming a Justin Jefferson, I think the talent's always going to shine through. Obviously, Minnesota is going to continue to rely on that passing game. They're going to be pass heavy as much as any other team in the league. And so Justin Jefferson's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, after that, when it came back to you started the quarterbacks here with Jalen Hurts, the second round pick, following that up with Joe Mixon. Then you go with Christian Watson, DeAndre Hopkins after that. Then you follow that up with Miles Sanders and Kyle Pitts as well. Odell Beckham, and I got to ask you this here, Steezy. What are your expectations? We've been talking, a big theme of the show here. We've been talking about Baltimore and what to expect from this offense. For Odell Beckham, this is going to be his swan song year. What are your expectations for him this season?
I have high expectations for Odell Beckham Jr. I understand the concerns with his knee, and there's always the fact that, he could get injured at any point in time. But the last time we saw him on the football field against the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl, I mean, he was on his way to, what did he say, having 13 catches and 200-plus yards. And so maybe not that exactly statistically, but I just feel like, especially when a receiver has a relationship with his quarterback off the field. Remember, Lamar Jackson have been lobbying for OBJ to join the team for years now. And so I think now that that's finally happened, Todd Monken is definitely going to open up the passing game. They're going to be passing a lot more. And so I think with that being said, I mean, he's the number one receiver on that team. Mark Andrews will still probably be the most targeted guy, but as far as the wide receivers, I know Zay Flowers has been picking up a lot of hype, but Odell Beckham Jr. has something to prove, and he's getting paid like it. And so I'm not sure if he's going to be a wide receiver 1, but honestly, I like him as a high-end wide receiver 3. Sounds crazy, but believe me.
So speaking of people gaining a lot of hype, you take Kenneth Gainwell, and it's a battle royale of running backs right now in Philadelphia. We've seen all the reports, him with the first team. I mean, we've seen everything, and it's definitely brought up the ADP. So who's the odd man out in this backfield in Philadelphia? Because Jalen Hurts is going to get his as well, man. It's legit a battle royal for running back supremacy here.
No doubt. And I know in fantasy, these are situations, guys tend to avoid. But if anything, I'm looking to actually stack Rashad Penny and Kenneth Gainwell together in the later rounds. And so I think with the Kenneth Gainwell, I mean, he has the most familiarity over there in Philadelphia alongside of Boston Scott. DeAndre Swift, I'm kind of out on DeAndre Swift this year. I mean, he's played with a stacked offensive line. He played with a good offense, in the Detroit. He's had playmakers around him, and not to say that he's not going to do anything with the best offensive line in front of him this time around. I just think that along with his inability to stay healthy, I'd stay away from the DeAndre Swift. You're getting these guys, Kenneth Gainwell, Rashad Penny, 2, 3, almost 4 rounds later. And so I'd rather go with those two, any combination of those two, as opposed to getting a DeAndre Swift 2 or 3 rounds earlier.
You see in the last few weeks, Rashad Penny definitely starting to drop off draft boards just a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how all these running backs are implemented, as well with Jalen Hurts, who you do have on your team. Let's bring in someone who you're very familiar with on Bettor Sports Network, part of Sportstopia. Simon Groeneveld is going to join us here. And while Simon's joining us, just going to remind you all, and Simon, it's good to see you, but we're right now, for those that are just joining us, a 12-team mock draft, PPR, 3 wide receivers, 2 flexes in this one, kicker, defense, and 7 bench spots. For scoring, quarterback touchdown passes are 5 points, rushing for QBs 6, and then for running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, 6 points apiece. Right now, we're sitting in the 11th round, and for Simon's team here, Simon started out taking Tyreek Hill. And Simon, let me just tell you, and by the way, our better boss, Matt Deutsch, says, and Simon definitely did say, hey, I'm going to rock this draft board, take Tyreek Hill here, 4th overall. Please explain it, sir.
Man, I mean, after what we saw last year, over 1,700 yards in that offense with Tua, we're expected to have a fully healthy Tua for 17 games. I'm buying into the training that he did in the offseason to protect himself, to protect his head, to protect himself from concussions. I know it looks silly, but those little hits add up. And if he can protect himself a little bit on each and every single one of them, maybe we see a healthy Tua all year. And that's the question. If Tua's healthy, is anybody going to be shocked if Tyreek is the #1 overall wide receiver? No. So I'm taking a guy here that has the chance to be the top scoring flex player in the league at 4th overall. It was between him and Kelsey, but with the amount I've been drafting Tua late, it just makes it a little bit more fun to get Tyreek Hill there in the 1st round.
Fully confident in Tyreek Hill, 4th overall to Simon Groeneveld. And then he takes in the 2nd round, he takes Derrick Henry after that. T. Higgins followed up in the 3rd round, his 2nd wide receiver, then fulfills the tight end with T.J. Hockenson. Brandon Ayuk then goes in the 5th round here, another wide receiver for Simon. Then Rachaad White, Dalvin Cook, back-to-back running backs for him, and then taken Tua, like he was just mentioning, Samaje Perine, and then Anthony Richardson he takes after that. So pretty much, I'm guessing from what you just said, Simon, you took Anthony Richardson to hedge just in case Tua takes a few headshots to the ground again, because look, and again, it's hard to put this into perspective, but with what went on last year, with how he was kept out and brought back in, the concussion protocol, were all the protocols actually taken into account? It was like a major controversy last year, but now you got to wonder if the league will be a little bit more hypersensitive if Tua takes a shot to the head, especially early in the year, maybe extending an absence. Was that the thought process for you when you followed up with Anthony Richardson 2 rounds later?
That is the thought process. It's a hedge. I've got a lot of exposure to Tua this year, and to pair him with a high upside rookie like Anthony Richardson is a lot of fun. Usually if I'm drafting Tua or one of those guys like a Derek Carr or a Daniel Jones, someone who's a little bit less exciting, I'll try to grab Anthony Richardson to pair with them. When it comes to Tua's health, though, with the focus that there was on his brain health last year, on the concussions, I'm of the opinion the Dolphins would not be saying the things they're saying about his health if it was not true. There is a magnifying glass on that organization, on how they're handling player health, and then specifically on how they're handling hits to the head. So I agree with you. There's a higher risk of a hit potentially leading to him being out, but I'm also trusting the words coming out of that franchise, because they would have to be so stupid to be saying that he's good to go, ready to go whenever he's at risk of another concussion like that.
So Simon taking 2 quarterbacks for that reason to hedge a little bit. John Daigle picking at the number 12 spot from 4 for 4. John, I just want to ask you, we're going to let you go here in just a second, but you've taken, since we talked to you last time about Jonathan Taylor, you've now also taken Brian Robinson and then Raheem Mostert after that. Then Jonathan Mingo from Carolina. This guy just intrigues me. Watched a lot of tape on him, those short routes that he can run. He's got some speed from the burst, from the get-go. And I feel like with Bryce Young there, he's going to be relying on short passing, and that's where Mingo comes in. And also with a who's who of receiving core, because they don't really have that much depth in that regard. Was that your thought process, getting Mingo? Because I got 3 shares of him so far in my drafts.
He's the type of player I just like to bet on, a 98th percentile athlete who the C's did part for a little bit, given that questionable DJ Shark injury ahead of the season opener. No production for Mingo in college. That's what's always worrisome. given that he averaged just 3.5 catches per game for his career, which are running back totals, basically. Never reached over 900 yards receiving at any point in college as well. But just a freak athlete with the X type of size that no one else on that team offers, Adam Thielen included, who's more of a possession receiver. So, yeah, a player I like to bet on, at least for my bench, and someone that, with a rookie quarterback, I don't know how often we'll use them in the first stretch of games, but as we know, rookie wide receivers break out over the second half of the season. So I don't mind as my wide receiver 5, 6, taking them on my bench and just keeping them there until the later portion of the year.
John, let me ask you a question. I'm actually Steezy and Simon going to ask you as well, because we do have a question in our chat. So we'll all kind of participate here. Ban Santana asking, it's an either or with 2 versus 2. So would you guys rather, and we'll start with you, John, would you rather have James Cook and Donovan Peoples-Jones, so those two, Cook and Donovan Peoples-Jones, or Michael Pittman and Deonta Foreman?
Personally, James Cook, Donovan Peoples-Jones. I have a lot of questions about Donovan Peoples-Jones, but Elijah Moore is a career slot receiver. Many mouths to feed in Cleveland, and offense I expect to bounce back, but at least DPJ is starting in 2 wide sets on the final year of his contract. Had a little bit of a breakout, too, last year before Watson got under center, so maybe there's some juice there. Not to mention that the way running back really works out is that the high ceiling wide receivers in the 5th through 7th rounds are going around the no ceiling, high floor running backs. And so what I've been doing, I think a skeleton key for 2023 drafts is avoiding those, Najee Harris through Travis Etienne, all the way down to J.K. Dobbins tier of players, and instead going with wide receivers in that range. But that's left behind pass catching backs with no competition, which is Rachaad White and James Cook. So regardless of how I think James Cook fares as a satellite back in the NFL, he actually does work out really well for any build and drafts this year, just how they're structured. So I'll take James Cook, DPJ personally.
John Daigle picking at the 12th spot in our mock draft here from 4 for 4. And John, where can everybody find your work?
4for4.com. Waiver wire week 1 is coming on Monday afternoon. Please don't remind me. And you can get that all with promo code Daigle10, 10% off a subscription.
John, thank you so much for stopping by, and good luck with the rest of your mock, all right?
Of course, good luck.
We're
Enjoy,
going to bring in Kate Magdziuk here in just a second from Sportstopia. We can bring Kate in right now. But, Steezy, I want to get back to the question here that Ban Santana asked in the chat here. And by the way, you can ask some questions and we'll make sure we answer them. As all of you out there, get ready for your fantasy football draft. So, Steezy, I'm going to ask you, James Cook and Donovan Peoples-Jones or Michael Pittman and Deonta Foreman in a full PPR?
Honestly, I think there should be a consensus. I'm actually in love with James Cook. I might have way too much as far as James Cook shares in a bunch of my leagues this year, especially for those of you guys that like to go wide receiver heavy. James Cook is actually the RB2, and I wouldn't be surprised in some cases the RB1 for a lot of these teams that are, going wide receiver / quarterback and tight end early in their drafts. With the James Cook, I understand Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills don't pass to the running backs all that often, but Fancy, like you said, he's an unquestioned guy over there. Damien Harris could vulture a touchdown or 2, but in a high-octane offense, they took him in the 2nd round. He's had a lot of glowing reports out of training camp. I mean, he, to me, is a low-end RB1 / high-end RB2. Again, I know that sounds crazy, but that alone kind of takes the cake. Whatever Donovan Peoples-Jones can contribute, I think that's really just a cherry on top. Michael Pittman, I'm not super high on this year. There's a lot of competition over there at wide receiver, and I don't know how much they're really going to pass the ball. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of passive volume over there in Indianapolis. Deonta Foreman, you talked about him earlier, but that Chicago Bears running back room with Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson, that's something I'm staying far and away from. And so to me, it's an easy answer, James Cook and DPJ.
2-0 Ban Santana for Cook and Peoples-Jones. Steezy Smith picking from number 1 from Sportstopia. And Steezy, where can we find all your work?
Man, honestly, outside of Sportstopia, you can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram at Steezy Smith.
Yes, and by the way, the reason why we're asking a lot of Sportstopia representation here, but Sportstopia being so new, that way you're probably like, let's check out this team, just a little bit of Sportstopia analysts, and that's where you can find everybody. And Steezy, thank you again for stopping by, and good luck the rest of the way.
Man, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Peace out, y'all.
See you later, Steezy.
Steezy.
Picking from number 1 here. We're sitting in the 13th round of 18 here in this mock draft, 12 teams, and now bringing in pick number 2 after Steezy here, Kate Magdziuk, also of Sportstopia. Kate, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for the fantasy football season, but really most of all, excited about the start to the draft, guys. I don't mean to brag. I think I kind of crushed it. Not that that there is to say that necessarily there's like a wrong start in the first few rounds, but there can be, right? And I feel like I dominated this one. Started off the entire shebang here with Jamar Chase, followed up with Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris, who are both going to be atop the league in terms of total touches once again this year. I feel pretty good about the start, and I'm feeling even better about the fact that we're going to watch football 1 week from tonight.
Oh, it's amazing. It's a great time to be a sports fan right now. It couldn't come soon enough here. Want to ask you, because besides some of the picks that you were just talking about here with Chase Jacobs, Najee Harris, you took Chris Godwin in the 4th round. And
Yes.
I just don't know what the hell to do with these Tampa Bay receivers at this point, because when it comes to Chris Godwin, it's not even, we know how skilled Chris Godwin is. And same with Mike Evans. It's the offensive line, and it's Baker freaking Mayfield here. But you taking Godwin in the 4th round, you don't seem to seem as concerned about it.
I know the upside of Chris Godwin, and that upside is top 5 wide receiver, like perennially. Obviously, last year returning from a torn ACL was still like super efficient. And posted a 1,000 receiving yard season coming off a torn ACL. Like I don't feel like we give him enough credit for that. I know as soon as Baker Mayfield was named the starter here in Tampa Bay, a lot of hype based on his deep ball potential for Mike Evans, but I do think we're just overlooking the fact that like this feels like the volume game for Chris Godwin. Right now, on average, Mike Evans being drafted a couple rounds later at wide receiver 30. But I think generally speaking, we've seen so much volatility from this offense, or from Mike Evans in particular. Sorry, my cat's just walking all over the place here. We've seen a lot of volatility from Mike Evans, and I think where Chris Godwin has absolutely shined is having both upside and a high floor. Evans finished as the wide receiver 16 last season, but literally more than a quarter of his fantasy points came in week 17. He had 10 catches, 207 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns against the Panthers. 15 or more fantasy points in PPR formats, and just 5 of 15 total regular season games. Like, consistency has not been his bag. I'll take the consistency of Chris Godwin. And I'm not so worried about the potential for Mayfield here. We saw, Jarvis Landry have a pretty successful season. Chris Godwin, he's also, I'm not going to call him like a chump in the deep receiving game. It's not his thing, but he could do it. Like, I just think the floor that Godwin could bring, give me Godwin all day, especially over Mike Evans, even if Mike Evans is going a couple rounds later.
So after Godwin, you then went back to the running back pool and took Alexander Madison, Javonte Williams, and then you went Justin Fields. And then this is who I want to ask you about, because you already have Najee Harris on your team. And then you take Pat Freiermuth. And please, explain to me what your expectations for Freiermuth are, because for me personally, whenever I'm starting to think about drafting a tight end and Freiermuth is still out there, I don't know what the hell to do or to expect from this guy. And you ended up drafting him here in this mock.
I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to pretend like I'm not a Steelers fan. You could probably see, I don't know if you guys can see behind me, my terrible towel. So I'm trying to be as level-headed here as possible. But my excitement here just comes from what we've seen in this offense throughout the preseason. I've honestly been probably the biggest skeptic of all when it comes to fantasy production outside of Deontay Johnson, who's been, nothing short of a volume hog over the past 4 seasons. Like, I think 140 plus targets over each of the last 3 years. You can't draft that as late as you're going to draft Deontay Johnson in any given draft. But Pat Freiermuth, I think, an area of emphasis for this team in 2023 needs to be, working the middle of the field. The team just emphasized way too heavily targets towards the end zone, which obviously limits that yards after the catch ability. You can't get yards after the catch if you're, George Pickens and your Deontay Johnsons are catching balls and doing the drag swag and all of that. Like you can't get yards after the catch if you're going out of bounds on every play. I think this needs to be an emphasis. And I think that Pat Freiermuth, if anybody, is going to be the guy to work the middle of that field.
After Pat Freiermuth, you took Elijah Moore, Adam Thielen. You went heavy with the wide receivers for your next 4 picks there. After Thielen, Kadarius Toney, and then Alec Pierce. And then you went back to the running backs here with Damian Harris, Chuba Hubbard, and Josh Kelly. So that is Kate's team drafted from the number 2 spot. Simon, we're going to let you go here in just a minute, but I got to ask you, because I said I would ask you about that question regarding James Cook and Peoples-Jones versus Pittman and Furman that Ban Santana asked in the chat. And then I see that you ended up taking Peoples-Jones there. I feel like I don't even need to ask you anymore.
Yeah, I thought it sounded like a pretty good idea whenever Ban Santana threw it in there to grab Peoples-Jones. If you look at my flex spots on this team, I've got Samaje Perine and Dalvin Cook, which are both players that I believe in and like drafting this year. But putting double running backs in those flex spots from the starters gives me a little bit more risk. And so instead of taking some of these high upside guys that have undefined roles here in the later rounds, I grabbed Tyler Boyd and Donovan Peoples-Jones, both players that I think have pretty defined but very low upside roles that if something is to go wrong, I have that safety blanket on my bench. I'm going to follow it up with some higher upside guys here now, but with the double running backs, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable because that is a higher risk of losing one of those guys earlier in the season.
Simon Groeneveld from Sportstopia. You've seen him a bunch on Bettor Sports Network, part of the Front Yard Fantasy team. And Simon, where can everybody else find your work?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at FYFSimon, and then check out our YouTube channel at Front Yard Fantasy. We'll be live a little bit later today at 3 p.m. Eastern time for the Fantasy Football Game Show, playing some Jeopardy with our friend Chris Towers. So come hang out with us there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, by the way, the Front Yard Fantasy crew, great on the production front. And I told John Luke Garofalo, who I saw at the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio a few weeks ago, as someone who was also a host on Bettor Sports Network, your intro to your show, to your Front Yard Fantasy show, amazing. I loved your intro. It was so simple, but at the same time, amazing looks to it. So I don't know if that was you making it, but I have to give you some ups on that open, man.
I appreciate that. And I'm going to pretend to take credit.
Okay. Simon Groeneveld, thank you so much for stopping by. And let's bring in Bob Harris from Football Diehards as we're now sitting in the 15th round. Kate's going to hang with us for a little bit as well. And for Bob Harris, who was picking at number 11 in this one, started with Nick Chubb, then followed up with a bunch of receivers after that, including A.J. Brown, Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, Michael Pittman, and then goes back to the running back pool after that, James Conner, then drafting Trevor Lawrence, Khalil Herbert, and Evan Engram, filling out other positions now. But Bob, what's going on? Welcome to the show, man.
Fancy. Thanks for having me. Hi, Kate. How's everyone doing? Let's sit here just, looking at like Kate and Britt and Cody taking all my favorite players and kind of just bumming out, man.
Bob, let me ask you this, because was it your plan your whole time? I mean, are you kind of just following along with the draft board and seeing where it falls for you? Or have you had the plan in mind to go very receiver heavy early like you did in this one?
I've been feeling pretty good receiver heavy. I like getting over the anchor running back. I think Nick Chubb is pretty much that guy for me, that I'm really comfortable with as my primary back. And once I get that, then I don't feel like I need to dip back into running backs for a while. The so-called dead zone doesn't seem all that dead to me. Plenty of paths to workload. You know what I like, Fensty? I like paths to workload. Give me a little opportunity for volume, and I'm pretty happy about it.
So, you drafted a little bit later on, you drafted Trevor Lawrence, where you got him in the 7th round, solid there. And then you drafted Evan Engram. Let me ask you this, man. What are your expectations for Engram now that Calvin Ridley is part of this mix? Travis Etienne's going to be catching some passes as well. So is it too crowded? I mean, you clearly have some confidence in Engram. Thoughts on him this year?
I don't have a ton of confidence, but, thought that might be a good time to go for the hookup and grab somebody maybe with some upside or a solid floor later. I was hoping Simon would be around if I took Tyler Higbee just to trigger him, because I know that's not one of his favorites. But I went with Dalton Kincaid, so I feel like I have plenty of upside at the position a little later there. So I feel pretty comfortable with that. I'm going to make a quick pick here.
Ooh, where are you going? Live on the clock here.
I don't know. I think I'm just going to take some flyers here on some wide receivers. And so the choice is between old guys, the proven pass, or unproven youngsters. I think I'll go with an old guy here and try an unproven youngster with the next pick. Because I know Kate loves Pittsburgh Steelers. I think I'll go with the Pittsburgh Steelers' new slot receiver, Allen Robinson. Don't expect him to turn into the Allen Robinson of old, but maybe I can cobble a game or two out of him.
Yeah, someone who's heavily vested in Deontay Johnson, and Kate, with what you were just talking about, I thought the same way. Great value there. Allen Robinson better not eat in too much to that, and I don't think he will. I think we're all good on that front here. Let's also bring in Matt Galka from Sportstopia too to talk about his team and Galka's guys here. Let's go over from where he was picking at the 7 spot, kind of right in the middle, starting with wide receivers here with Stephon Diggs and Jalen Waddle. Then went 2 running backs with Ramondre Stevenson. Damian Pierce gets his tight end, and George Kittle, another running back. So 3 of the 4 right there in running backs with Cam Akers. Marquise Brown then after that, along with Cortland Sutton. Deshaun Watson then for his quarterback. Then Allen Lazard. Back to the quarterback pool, he goes for Aaron Rodgers, and then KJ Osborne, Jalen Hyatt after that, Zach Moss, Zamir White here. Matt, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Doing great. You guys remember the show Pros versus Joes? I don't know. You ever remember that show? I think it was on Spike TV or one of those. That's kind of how I feel right now. I'm one of the Joes, right? And I'm mixing it up with the pros here. And we're trying to see if we can do some damage, you know? We're trying to see if one of the home league guys can get in here and teach some of those crafty vets a few things.
So, Matt, let me ask you this about the strategy here with Deshaun Watson. I mean, you took Deshaun Watson in the 9th, but then you follow that up a couple rounds later with Aaron Rodgers, and this is just a league where you start just one quarterback. What was the strategy behind taking Rodgers a couple rounds later?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I got a little bamboozled when somebody picked Tua on me. He was my guy, and I looked at the board and I was like, "Oh, he'll be there. He'll be there. There's no way he won't be there." And then he's gone. So it kind of made me switch up a little. I'm taking a little gamble, I feel like, on Deshaun. Right? I'm hoping for the Texans Deshaun that was electric. We didn't really see it last year, so all reports out of camp are that, and look, he didn't have a full season last year. Now he's got a lot of time with his guys. So I'll take a gamble and I'll think that Deshaun Watson could get back to the Deshaun Watson that we saw on the Texans that was in the mix for MVP or Offensive Player of the Year. But here's the thing: if he doesn't, I'm a big narrative guy, and I'll admit I'm a Packers fan. Aaron, I wish you well. You know what? You're on the New York Jets now. But if the narrative is that Aaron Rodgers is pissed off about what happened in Green Bay, and he goes to New York and we're on Hard Knocks, and all of a sudden people are comparing Garrett Wilson to Devontae Adams in his prime, and I've heard all of it. If that's all going to happen, and all of a sudden we think Nathaniel Hackett is a great coach again, I guess if Deshaun fizzles out, then I have the Rodgers Lazard stack on my bench. So I think it's a good way to pivot, especially if Deshaun looks like the bad Deshaun that we saw for a couple of games last year. So it was kind of an insurance policy because I'm rolling the dice on Deshaun and he might pan out and I might not have to use Aaron at all. But if we're all going to buy into the Jets hype train, and I guess I am, then I'm going to roll with the guy who might win MVP because he's angry at Green Bay. We'll see.
Luke Musgrave, you took him as your second tight end here in the 16th round. And look, I know it's late and we have an extra bench spot in this league, and I get that. And Kate, I'm going to ask you in just a second about whether in leagues like this you would take a second quarterback or a second tight end. But Matt, with Musgrave, what are your expectations for him? Because it just seems like since Romeo Doubs got hurt, all of a sudden everybody is jettisoned focus on Luke Musgrave, and even I've been getting asked whether or not he has tight end 1 potential, which I'm not sure of that. But what are your thoughts on the Musgrave pick?
Well, look, I on preseason. Now here's the bad part, right? Like he didn't have a lot of his last year of college. He got hurt, didn't play. So like that's the gamble, right? But you look at in preseason, I like that he had, when he was on the field with Jordan Love, 84% route participation, 22% target share. Just watching Green Bay like I have for a little bit. Big Robert Tonyan, when he was there. Yeah, he had some good games. A lot of it was touchdown dependent. I like what Jordan Love is doing, that he might be passing to the tight end, middle of the field more. than Aaron looked like he was willing to do in the past couple of seasons. So in this late stage of the draft here, I'll take a flyer on him. I mean, we love the training camp reports, right? Like we love throwing around hyperbole and this guy's going to do this and this guy's going to do this. But if somebody says that Luke Musgrave reminds them of Travis Kelce, if he's 50% of Travis Kelce, I'll take it. I'll take it. And we're this late in the draft. Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take a shot.
16th round, Luke Musgrave. And then Kate Magdziuk, who's with us here. Kate also takes a tight end here. And Kate, I got to ask you, because I was going to ask you in general, are you someone who is more privy to drafting a second quarterback and a second tight end when you only really need to start one of them? I know we've got the extra flex. We've got 2 flexes here. But in general and in the past, what has your overall strategy been? Do you just go for the one, or we see here you got a tight end, another tight end, but do you generally stay away from that second tight end, or do you normally get your second tight end in the draft?
Definitely dependent on my comfort level with the initial, tight end one or QB one that I've drafted. Now, when it comes to my specific roster here in this mock, I did roll with Justin Fields at quarterback, who I think, I feel very secure with, both in terms of his upside as a rusher, efficiency, potential efficiency as a passer, especially with the yak ability of DJ Moore. I feel good there. I don't feel like I need to take any additional flyers, but as we alluded to when I drafted tight end Pat Freiermuth of the Steelers, like there are still some questions. I think that, like I said, his ability to work the middle of the field pairs really well with something that I think they need to emphasize here heading into 2023. So that there's still a lot of questions left to be answered about this offense. Matt Canada, for as successful as we saw this team in the preseason, still saw a lot of kind of like the same type of plays. Like didn't get, maybe they're keeping some things in the vault, but I don't feel overly comfortable with Pat Freiermuth, even if I think there's some upside there. So that's one of those moments where I'm going to maybe hedge with a tight end too, or if I'm kind of, looking at quarterback and I'm not 100% sure that this could be an every week starter. That's when I start to hedge that quarterback and tight end position, have at least the interest there because, tight end, obviously a very volatile position. You don't really know what you're going to get week to week, but Jake Ferguson in particular, tight end for the Dallas Cowboys, is one of my favorite late end targets at the position this year. Every league that I'm like punting the tight end position, I'm walking away with Jake Ferguson, who heading into his second year, like we know Dak Prescott absolutely loves the tight end position. Word is that he really, really loves Jake Ferguson. Was super efficient as a receiver here throughout the preseason, targeted on 37.5% of his routes run here in limited preseason action. Dak Prescott looked to him, I think, 3 times on their opening drive as a starting unit. I think he's going to be really involved, and I think he's going to be the steal of most drafts. So if anything, that's just me trying to get my guy and make sure that nobody else can even look Jake Ferguson's way, because he's my guy.
You got to call your shots and you got to have confidence. And that's where, and we've mentioned a lot during the show about average draft position, but you throw that out the window. If you have a target that you want, you have to go after your players. And so many people are just so attached and obsessed and seeing ADPs and, oh, this analyst drafted this person there, or saying to draft this person at 130, but it's now we're at the point where we're in the 10th round. You got to overdraft sometimes when you want your players. We're talking about the end of the draft year, so you didn't really have to do that, Kate, but that's something that's very important that you just said. You have to go after your players, even if that means you say screw it to the ADP and you overdraft it. You got to plant your flag somewhere. And Kate Magdziuk from Sportstopia joining us. Kate, where can everybody find your work?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Going to be working here with the Sportstopia team throughout the season here, pinch hitting wherever you guys need me throughout the year. Also creating some fantasy football content for Pro Football Focus, Yahoo Sports, working as the managing editor of Behind the Steel Curtain, SB Nation's Pittsburgh Steelers site. I'm a little bit of everywhere this year. You can't get rid of me. And I'm excited to see what Sportstopia, what kind of splash we make in year one.
Kate, thank you so much again for stopping by, and good luck making your final pick here.
Thank you.
Bob Harris here. Bob, you took Justin Ross, and I got to ask you, because when you took Justin Ross in the 16th round, trying to think of when it comes to prioritization, because Patrick Mahomes came out and essentially told the fantasy audience, you're not going to like us too much here, because he's going to try to feature multiple pass-catching weapons here. So was it to just get, when you took Justin Ross, was it just to get a share, an indirect share of Mahomes, or what are your thoughts regarding Justin Ross entering the season?
I have somebody with about a 1/6 chance of being Kansas City's wide receiver one for at least 1 week this season. The Chiefs told us this, what the plan was, right? When they paid $500 million for Patrick Mahomes and told Tyreek Hill to see who else liked them, right? I mean, they put their money on the quarterback position, and they're going to trust their quarterback to identify the wide receiver one every single play. And it's the open guy, and they're going to be, so I think, us sitting here wishing that the Chiefs have said that they would like Kadarius Toney to emerge as that guy. Okay, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I think all these players that have roles in this team, except for Rashee Rice, until he starts catching the football, have a chance to be the wide receiver one. That was a total shot, and I apologize for that, Rashee Rice. I want to go back to something you talked about, though, Fensty, because I think it's really important. ADP is not when you have to draft players, it's when players are getting drafted.
Right.
You use that strategically to your advantage to make sure you secure players that you want, maybe a little ahead of the field. I know somewhere out there, my friend Jeff Ratcliffe is going, no reaching. Reaching is okay to get players you want. As I mentioned earlier, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at Britt Flynn's team with players that I love, like Jahmyr Gibbs and Tyler Lockett, that maybe I was a little bit of a prisoner to IDP on. I don't think I would have gotten, there was no way I was taking Gibbs over my top 2 picks. So I just wasn't going to get him in this draft. And sometimes you have to live with that. Tyler Lockett, I had a choice. I could have taken Tyler Lockett over DJ Moore. I mean, I'm glad I have DJ Moore, but man, my longing for Tyler Lockett is strong. But you can go take that over to Cody taking Darren Waller. That's a player that I really wanted. I considered at 4, and that would have been a reach. But that's a player I really want, and I really believe in a tight end who has that path to wide receiver one kind of workload. And another one that I missed out on that Kate got that I considered again around earlier is Elijah Moore, who I talked to Steve King of the Browns Daily Dose on Sirius this past week. And, we asked him, so what are the primary pieces of this Browns offense? He says it's going to run through 3 guys. So I'm sitting there going, okay, Watson, check. Nick Chubb, check. And as I sat there waiting for him to say Amari Cooper, he instead said Elijah Moore. I went, whoa, really? So we pressed him on it, and he was pretty adamant. I mean, Amari Cooper's going to have a great role, and I'm not worried about him not being the wide receiver one for that team. I drafted him as my second wide receiver. I think that's fine. But I think Steve's point was they're really going to scheme up and try to get Elijah Moore a lot of work. So I feel like he's a great value later in drafts. But we tend to be prisoners to ADP or our selection list, right? So if you're out there drafting, you're doing 1 draft a year, go out there to your draft site a little early, drill down into the draft selection list, how it's listed, and know where players are that are off the radar, or maybe players that are listed a little higher than you'd like to see them be listed, and maybe adjust your strategies a little bit. So there's a big push to adhere to ADP in our minds, right? It's a trap, people. You don't have to. It's not a golden rule.
No, it's not. And something else that you brought up, which is very important, is that you got to show up to your draft, because the different draft sites, the different places to play, their ADPs are so different. Take the time to fill your queue. You got to do it. You're going to see players that you're normally seeing in the 50s and 60s, a couple of them, all of a sudden in Yahoo, who knows how often they're updating their own ADPs. I mean, for me personally, I've worked for websites where I was told back months before the season to come up with a default rankings list, and they never told me to update it. So you don't know when these sites are being updated, and that's why instead of showing up 5 minutes before thinking you're all cool, fashionably late, it's stupid. show up 20 minutes early, get your queue set, get your draft targets set, and then you'll be able to be organized and you won't have to worry, oh, where's my guy? Or let's say you were just sniped. You got a few other players right there that are ready to go in your queue rather than forcing yourself while the clock is winding down and dwindling, forcing yourself to maybe take someone that you wouldn't have normally taken if you had a clearer headspace after that. Bob, where can everybody find you and your work?
They can find me. I make it easy on the social media platform of your choice, Football Die Hard. On the website, it's called footballdiehards.com. There's a radio show called Football Diehards on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, and the Football Diehards YouTube channel, where you'll find me twice a week streaming away and taking questions and interacting with the peoples who I love so much.
Bob Harris, the Football Diehard. Thank you so much for stopping by, Bob, and being in this draft with us.
Appreciate it, Fensty. Thanks for inviting me. And great draft. A really tough room, and I shake my fist angrily at many of my fellow drafts.
It's fun. Imagine if we were playing this out. It's just a mock here. The draft is completed, and we've had the board in front of you throughout the draft here. And Matt, while I have you here, and by the way, Matt Galka was picking 7th here from Sportstopia. Matt, let me ask you this. Are you somebody, and you didn't do it in this draft, but do you try to maybe get the top kicker or top defense, or have you in the past? Or are you willing to just play the matchups? Because sometimes what you see in drafts here, let's say few rounds before, all of a sudden you see a Tucker and a San Francisco defense go off the board there, and someone's overdrafting them because, someone's got to be the first to draft it anyway. Are you someone that tends to just play the matchups when it comes to kicker and defense and not give it too much thought?
Yeah, I don't give it too much thought, and I don't know how you can, because you could draft a top defense, right? And how many times have we seen, a late pick six, a fumble at the end of the game, especially if you're betting on that game and then the backdoor cover happens or you lose it. Those things are unpredictable. I think you're better off when you're going with your kicker and defense. I'm not saying I stream every week, but I think you're saving yourself a lot of trouble if you do that, because I've seen a top defense get torched. I've seen kickers miss kicks. I mean, I get the consistency factor. I'm never going to say, like, if Justin Tucker was there and I happen to look at my team and say, okay, I can afford this, yeah, I'll go get him. But I'd rather look at a kicker like, okay, let me look at the point total that week. Who's projected to score a lot of points, team totals, and I could probably stream a pretty good guy from there. I don't try to rack my brain. And I want to go back to what you said about ADP. I myself, I think we're all a prisoner of ADP sometimes. But I also think, to that point, we're a prisoner of narrative sometimes too. And and I'm not talking about a top guy. Justin Jefferson is the number one. Nobody's going to argue that. But I look at a guy on my team like Courtland Sutton, okay? Last year, Courtland Sutton was being drafted in the 4th round. The Broncos were a train wreck. The coach was a train wreck. I know that Sean Payton got a lot of guff for saying, the previous coaching staff. But guess what? He wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong about this. So he might have broken Coach Bro code, but he wasn't wrong. But what I don't understand is, with a better coach, hopefully a better offensive line, a better Russ Wilson. I'm going to bet Russ Wilson goes back to at least a semblance of what we saw in Seattle, rather than last year being the norm. I'd rather say last year was the anomaly. Why all of a sudden does Courtland Sutton suck? I don't understand it. I'm willing to go get that guy if he keeps falling, because we all said he was the guy last year, and then all of a sudden he's not. It's not something I believe in. So I think sometimes we get trapped in narratives, and Breece Hall is another one. Breece Hall coming back from an ACL injury as a running back, and all of a sudden we think he's going to do the exact same thing. They go and sign Dalvin. He's going to do the exact same thing. One guy has only ever come back from that injury and been a superhero afterward, Adrian Peterson, once in a lifetime. I'm not betting on Breece Hall, but I get that the talent is there. I just think we get wrapped up in these narratives sometimes, like I did with Aaron Rodgers in the MVP candidacy, maybe. But that goes hand in hand with ADP. I think we get wrapped up in it, and then you just have to kind of cut through the noise. Sometimes it's the eye test, and you go get your guy.
Right, and it's something else too, by the way, that you just brought up, Matt, and for everybody out there, and I know a lot of this generation sports fans, I mean, you'd think everybody watches football, but watching tape is just so imperative and so important. And everybody just wants to surf through the box scores and everything. You're not really learning anything from that. You need seeing is believing, like you were just saying. And I am a tape worm. I try to watch as much as I can so I can see not only during the play where these guys are lining up, how involved they are, the consistency. That's what you get when you're watching the tape, when you're seeing these athletes actually on the field. And by the way, you brought up Cortland Sutton, and you're seeing guys like Marvin Mims, and you're seeing Dulcich being all of a sudden brought up with the ADPs. Sutton staying exactly where he is. And like you're saying, I'm going to draft him where I can with the value, even if it's a little bit of an overdraft. With Jerry Jeudy's injury and the murky reporting surrounding it, I'll take Cortland Sutton and his experience all day. They've got multiple damaged pass catchers in Denver. So I'm with you there with Cortland Sutton, and I'm kind of surprised he wasn't being brought up a little bit more when it comes to average draft position as I was looking on the data. But Matt Galka picking 7th from Sportstopia. Matt, where can we find all your work?
Twitter at Matt Galka, just my name. Instagram, Matt Galka TV. You're going to find some politics in there too, because in my other life, I also do just news. So a little bit of both, you know. If you're not angry enough at your fantasy team, please get angry at my political reporting. It'll be great.
Wow, look at that there. The dual position eligibility here, sports and politics right there.
The dual threat. I'm the dual threat. I'm the Anthony Richardson of this league.
You're the Joe Webb, essentially, at this point, the Taysom Hill at this point.
Yeah. There we go.
Matt, thank you so much for stopping by.
Fancy, thank you.
Of course. And I want to thank all of you for watching this mock draft, the Sportstopia Fantasy Fire and Ice Fantasy Football Mock Draft. I want to thank all of our participants, Steezy Smith, Kate Magdziuk, both from Sportstopia, Cody Carpentier from Sportstopia, Simon Groeneveld from Sportstopia and Front Yard Fantasy, Britt Flinn from Fantasy Alarm and BSN, Stu Monotone Durst from Sportstopia, Matt Galka, who you just saw from Sportstopia, Jeff Ratcliffe from FTN, Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros, Terrell Furman from Sportstopia, Bob Harris from Football Diehards, and John Daigle from 4 for 4. And I also want to thank producer Keith as well for helping play point guard while we brought all these great analysts on who participated in this mock draft. It's been great being with you. I'm Justin Fensterman. Keep it locked into Bettor Sports Network because it is ultimate draft time, the final days of drafts before the season begins. And this is what we're all about. Let's win right here on Bettor Sports Network.